Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another session with Mr. Smith. Your humble, hopefully always humble. It's not always easy to be, but hopefully humble servant, Mr. Smith. And I wanted to talk about a lot about what I'm reading in this book. I mentioned it before. It's called Tavistock Institute, Social Engineering the Masses by Daniel Estulin. And I'm really digging this book. So if you want to get it, it wasn't too much on Amazon. But we're going to talk about, there's so much in this book, but we're going to talk about how there are powers that be and people that are working very hard to socially engineer you and sway you into a certain direction. Right? That was the whole purpose of TV. It was to hypnotize people and to get people, push them into a different reality. Right? Fantasy worlds. Right? They also call that their greater magic. These people are religious. Right? And they serve, the main god they serve is Lucifer, also known as Yahweh, as I mentioned in my last video about U2. We go into that. And they've been doing this, well, seemingly forever. Who are they? Who are the power structure, right? They are the descendants of the same people that started the Roman Empire. They're Romans. Okay, and then when that empire collapses, they just go on to the next one. Then they moved and started the Byzantine Empire, and then they moved and started the Khazarian Empire. And they keep just moving around. So let's take a look at this book. Let's just concentrate on modern times, however. Okay, and I titled this lesson, They Don't Want Us to Connect with God. And I'm going to show you that they don't. Because the answer is connecting with the Most High God. That is the answer to all these problems. Because the economy is collapsing. It's going to be crazy in the next 3 or 4 months. As these rent moratoriums stop and the mortgage moratoriums stop, people are going to be kicked out of their living situations. We'll see. But anyway, I wanted to read this. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about the Tavistock Institute. So we're just going to start here and, how the Tavistock Institute is in England. And they have been doing sociological experiments and manipulations. From there, the Beatles were created at the Tavistock Institute. But take a look at this. And of course, their connection to the Frankfurt School, which is where Theodor Adorno was one of the main guys there. But here's what it says in this book. It says, drug counterculture was precisely the weapon that the Frankfurt School and their fellow travelers employed. Now, this is in reference to the 1960s when they introduced LSD and the hippie movement. And this was all contrived, by the way. All this, the LSD was made in a lab in the 50s, I believe. Please don't take that stuff. Okay? You're opening portals to demons and things that you shouldn't be doing. Right? But that's what they want. Because the more your body is unclean, the less you can connect with your Creator, the Most High. So it says here, so this is in reference to starting the whole hippie movement, the drug counterculture, introducing LSD to the Western world, right? And it says here, drug counterculture was precisely the weapon that the Frankfurt School and their fellow travelers employed over the next 50 years to create a cultural paradigm shift away from the so-called authoritarian matrix of man in the living image of God. Okay, so they wanted to get people away from the mindset that we were made in the image of the Most High God. And man was made in the image of the Most High God, and we were made to have dominion over the earth. In other words, we're a lot more special than we think. But these wonderful people at the Tavistock Institute and the Frankfurt School want to get you away from that. And using drugs was one of the ways they wanted to do it. But let's read on. It says, they wanted to create a cultural paradigm shift away from the so-called authoritarian matrix of man in the living image of God and the superiority of the republican form of nation-state over all other forms of political organization. They transformed American culture toward an erotic, perverse matrix associated with the present politically correct tyranny of tolerance for dehumanizing drug abuse, sexual perversion, and the glorification of violence. For the Marxist/Freudian revolutionaries of the Frankfurt School, the ultimate antidote to the hated Western Judeo-Christian civilization was to tear that civilization down from the inside by turning out generations of necrophiliacs. Whew. Okay. So, they started the whole hippie movement, the drug culture, and if you really research the drug culture, these people at the Frankfurt School, they were doing it back in the 1800s, right? But they just introduced it to, now they're introducing it to the mainstream America, right? And it says they wanted people to go to the superiority of the republican form of nation-state over all other forms of political organization. That's what they did in Rome. And I'm going to show you in a minute, there were people that did it way back when, like 4,000 years ago. Nothing new under the sun, same tactics. So in other words, they don't want you to connect with God. They want their government, their republican form of nation-state, to be what you look for everything. Can you say socialism? Communism? Isms, corporate capitalism? Call it what you want. They transformed American culture toward an erotic, perverse matrix associated with the present politically correct tyranny, right, of tolerance. There's that word tolerance. We really shouldn't be tolerating a lot of this behavior, but we're told to be tolerant. I don't think we should be that tolerant. When I go on a date with a woman, for example, I'm not going to tolerate certain behavior that she does. She can't just say anything to me or get away with anything. There's boundaries. She has to be respectful, kind. Okay? And just as an example, no, I'm not going to tolerate whatever, If she shows up in short shorts with half her butt hanging out, no, I'm not going to tolerate that. But we're told we have to tolerate all this foolishness. So you can see that they were planning this, 60, 70, 80 years ago. And anytime a society gets so morally bankrupt like we are now, it starts to collapse. So this is their mode of operation. They just do this. Okay? And I'm going to show you that this was being done way back when. So we're going to go to another one of my favorite books called The Complete Works of Josephus. Now, if you don't know who Josephus is, he was a Roman he was a Roman, but he was of Israelite descent. And he wrote all of what he saw and the history of what was going on with his people and what was going on in the Roman Empire. Now, and he confirms the Bible, by the way, in his writings. So here's a historical document, a secular historical document that confirms the Bible. Right? So, but here, I'm going to read this right here. Okay? And it says, in the Josephus, this is chapter 4, verse or paragraph 2. And it says, "Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man and of great strength of hand. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God as if it was through his means they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them in a constant dependence on his power. Okay, so Nimrod, who was the most powerful man at this time? Now, he was the great-grandson of Noah. So, Noah made it through the flood. He had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So Ham had a son, Cush, and Cush had a son, Nimrod. Right? And Nimrod, so this is going way back. We're talking about 4,000 years ago. This was going way back. And Nimrod was the most powerful man in the world. He was the leader of the whole world at that time. And what was he trying to do here? He was trying to get people away from the fear of the Most High God and to bring everybody into constant dependence on his power. Right? What are the powers that be doing today? They are trying to get everybody dependent on the state. Give us our stimulus checks. Give us our universal basic income. Feed us, serve us. You are our all-seeing power. Right? They want to get you away from God, and that's exactly what Nimrod was doing way back when. So nothing newer than this under the sun. He was doing his brand of socialism, communism. Let's read further here. He, meaning Nimrod, also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. So he was mad at the Most High God. All right? And another thing I find interesting, right? He, it says, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness, right? He also, and I've read it in other texts, that Nimrod was one of the first New Agers. He got people to believe, oh, be your own God. In other words, be very narcissistic. It's all about you. Just do you. There's no creator. Okay, so this was going back way back when. Okay, and they're doing it today. They don't want you to connect with the Most High God. They want you to, because if you connect with the Most High God, then you will have power over them. And so nothing new under the sun. Now I know that the Masons, one of the people they venerate very highly is Nimrod. Okay. All right. And of course, Masonry, was started, the secret societies were started way back in Nimrod's days. They call them the ancient mystery schools, and they worked their way into the Babylonian Empire, and then eventually into the Greek and Roman empires. And of course, the Roman Empire still exists today. Right? They still run things. All right. And then, so getting back to this Tavistock Institute book, it says, the ultimate antidote to the hated Western Judeo-Christian civilization was to tear that civilization down from the inside by turning out generations of necrophiliacs. What's a necrophiliac? That is a person who is obsessed with death. Right? Look at our hospitals and our whole medical system. It's obsessed with being sick. They're not healing anything. That's why they call them doctors, not healers. Okay, let's look at another page in this book. Okay, just to kind of keep going with this, right? In the Tavistock Institute book, it says the counterculture model that the British had imposed on the United States, that's the British invasion, was based on the pagan ceremonies of ancient Egyptian and Roman empires. And these had a history of their own. The continuity of the cult of Apollo is important to this point. Okay, the cult of Apollo was what ran Rome. They were a group of high-level Romans. And now, these same people, right? Just more evidence that these are just descendants of the Romans. Now they're pushing it on us. Okay. It says I'm skipping ahead here. It says, from the death of Alexander the Great until the cult of Apollo dissolved itself into the cult of Stoicism it had created during the 2nd century BC. The base of the cult was Ptolemaic Egypt, which was basically Greek-controlled Egypt, from which the cult controlled Rome. In Egypt, the cult of Apollo syncretized the cult of Isis and Osiris as the direct imitation of the Phrygian cult of Dionysus and the Roman imitation, the cult of Bacchus. All right. This is getting a little deep here, but you get the idea. It's all connected. But here's what I wanted to read. These Roman families that did all this, cult of Apollo and stuff, eventually, over time, became known as the Venetian black nobility, British royal family today. And their members hold key positions within the inner circle organizations such as the Bilderberger Group. Okay, so more evidence that the same bloodlines, the same group of people run things and they're up to their old tricks. They're trying to get you away from God. And of course, what's the end result? You have just another civilization that is so morally bankrupt that it's collapsing, meaning the United States and the rest of the Western world. Okay, let's look at page 93 here on this. It says, now this is talking about the cult of Isis, which is like the cult of Apollo and all that, right? But it was in Egypt, right? It says, Isis is a drug cult. It is a cult of high priest and secret rituals. The secret rituals have been kept inside the British royal family and their ruling class friends for centuries. The cult was practiced in Egypt during the 3rd dynasty of the Old Kingdom, circa 2780 BC. Isis worship is essentially pagan, primitive mother worship. All right, so pagan means you worship the created and not the Most High God, and not the Creator. That's what a pagan is. It's not meant to be a derogatory term. It's just to describe people who worship the created. So, this book is basically telling us that the hippie movement, right, was basically a drug cult, right? Now, this book also explains that there were government agents at Woodstock passing out, LSD and microdoses of LSD to everybody, right? The whole purpose of Woodstock was to get everybody to be dirty, wallow in the mud, be unclean, and be drugged out for 3 days. And that's pretty much the purpose of all your music festivals, especially for the young folks. Maybe not the jazz music festivals, but all the music festivals for young people is to be drugged out for a whole weekend, right? Coachella, right? If you don't know Coachella, that's probably the most popular music festival right now. It's in the desert, about 30 miles east of Palm Springs. Maybe not that much east of Palm Springs, but you get the idea. And that's what people do. They dance around like these Roman Greeks you see on the screen here, and are all drugged out and have all kinds of nasty physical encounters with people they don't even know. All right? Again, the degradation of society. All right, so let's move on. Now we're going to talk about, first of all, here's an interesting quote in this book by this guy, Russell. He's actually Lord Russell, right? He's of an English noble family, right? Roman. Came into their own during the reign of Henry VIII. Okay? But this guy, Russell, said that the subject will make great strides when it is taken up by scientists under a scientific dictatorship. The actual psychologist of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. In other words, he's saying in the future, which is now is that future. Schools will have psychologists where they'll try different methods convincing students that snow is black. Snow is black meaning a metaphor for convincing students of an alternate reality. Now, I know that there are school psychologists, especially in high schools now, that seems to be their main purpose, to convince children that what they're feeling is because they're not really born a boy, they were born a girl. Seems like their plans are coming to fruition. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about some quotes that Aldous Huxley said. Aldous Huxley was a grandson of the famous biologist Thomas Henry Huxley, whose outspoken support of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution earned him the nickname Darwin's Bulldog. Did you know Charles Darwin's original title for his evolution book was The Origin of Species and the Superiority of the White Race? A lot of people don't know that. I just thought I'd throw that in there. They got rid of the end part, and now it just became The Origin of Species. Charles Darwin allegedly was also taking hallucinogenics when he wrote his book, The Origin of Species. Allegedly. But Aldous Huxley, if you don't know who he is, he's a novelist who liked to experiment with drugs to discover his inner creativity and spiritual connection. Interesting, spiritual connection. Gives more credence to what some people are saying, that drugs open doors to demons and spirits. But anyway, I could be reading this all day, but let's stay on topic here. Huxley wrote that book, A Brave New World. Now, one thing I've come to learn about a lot of these science fiction writers that we grew up with, like Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, and one of my favorites, Arthur C. Clarke, is that they were part of it. They were in the club, these secret societies. They're sorcerers. They're telling you what their plans are, right? They're telling you what they plan on doing with the population, right? They call that part of their lesser magic. Their lesser magic is they have to tell you what their plans are before they enact them. Okay, we'll talk about that maybe another time. But I just wanted to point this out, right? This Brave New World is standard reading in high schools, along with George Orwell's 1984. Here's some things you might not know about Aldous Huxley. There's a lot, but I'm not going to. He said, Aldous Huxley, in a speech on the U.S. State Department's Voice of America in 1961, Huxley spoke of a world of pharmacologically manipulated slaves, that means drugged out people, living in a concentration camp of the mind, enhanced by propaganda and psychotropic drugs. Interesting that they are pushing to make marijuana legal everywhere. And the weed today, man, is something. I haven't done that stuff in years, but it's been a long time. Marijuana's potency has come a long way since when I was in high school, where we'd drive into Pacoima and get a dime bag of what they call Mexican brick. It was cheap weed. Right? Oh, the good old days. Now it's like, man, you take one hit of that stuff and you're like, what? So these people that smoke weed constantly, I don't know, right? I don't know what's going on. But anyway, look at this. So Huxley was promoting and saying that these people would be in a concentration camp of the mind, enhanced by propaganda and psychotropic drugs learning how to love their servitude, and abandoning all will to resist. What does marijuana make you do? Makes you passive, makes you content, makes you very narcissistic. You think you're the greatest. Maybe not everybody, but and so you think that these people had a plan, and their plan is coming to fruition today, right? They're definitely trying to create a slave class. They're destroying the middle class, even the upper middle class. Okay. So, but the one thing they don't want you to do is connect with your Maker. So I'm going to end with this. It says here, I'll just keep reading it. Let's say, okay, so this, Huxley concluded, is the final revolution. Huxley's cohort in the 1950s experimentation with psychotropic drugs was Dr. Timothy Leary of Harvard University's psychology department. Be very wary of psychologists and psychiatrists, ladies and gentlemen. Very wary. Be very wary of people from these highfalutin colleges. Okay? But let's read on. Okay, Dr. Timothy Leary provided another glimpse into the perverted minds of the Russell Huxley Frankfurt School crowd in Flashback, his autobiographical account of the Harvard University Psychedelic Drug Project. Leary quoted Huxley, quote, "These brain drugs, mass-produced in the laboratories, will bring about vast changes in society. This will happen with or without you and me. All we can do is spread the word. The obstacle to this evolution, Timothy, is the Bible." So they even admit right here that the obstacle to their plans is the Scriptures. In other words, connecting with the Most High God. Okay? Get this. Let's just read on. We had run up against the Judeo-Christian commitment to one God, one religion, one reality that has cursed Europe for centuries and America since our founding days. So these guys are so anti-God and therefore anti-Christ. They are Satan's, all of them. Satan means the adversary. It says, drugs that open the mind to multiple realities inevitably lead to a polytheistic view of the universe. Right? Meaning serving many gods. Like the fallen angels and Satan, of course. Of course. We sense that the time for a new humanist religion based on intelligence, good-natured pluralism, and scientific paganism has arrived. So they kind of put a positive face on it. So, they don't want you connecting to the one true, Most High God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God that sent his Son, Christ, to redeem us from our sins. They want you to believe in all these different religions, polytheism. And of course, when I was getting stoned as a kid, yeah, man, I explored, all that crazy stuff. Anyway, something to think about. This is your humble servant. This is becoming a long one again. Please like and subscribe, and I hope this enlightened you. I hope this unplugged you. I hope this gave you some wisdom. I hope it helps you in any way possible. And have a blessed one, and we'll see you next time.